Okay, so imagine this. You're at a family dinner. Everything looks normal, but then, bam, your mother-in-law drops the bomb that she's leaving the family estates to your sister-in-law instead of you and your husband. Shocking. Right. And here's the twist. Her father, the real owner, is sitting right there, pen in hand. Crazy. Stick around, because what happens next is pure chaos. And I mean, it's not just drama, it's a full-on battle over who really controls the family legacy. So, where are you watching from today? The migraine had started around noon. That dull, insistent throb behind my left eye, the kind that makes every sound feel sharper and every light a little too bright. I was sitting at the long mahogany dining table of the Victorian estate, a house Mark and I had spent 6 years restoring, every nail and beam our own labor. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass, a mixture of exhaustion and tension. The morning had been swallowed by calls with contractors about the foundation repair for the guest cottage, and the afternoon spent preparing a celebratory dinner that Lydia had demanded, though she hadn't even said what we were celebrating. Attendance was mandatory, she'd said. No explanations, just a presence she commanded. Mark sat beside me, shoulders hunched, looking like a man bracing for a blow he knew was coming. His hands rested on the table, but his fingers drummed nervously against the wood. He worked 60-hour weeks as a structural engineer, yet every spare moment he poured into this house, ensuring his grandfather, Robert, could spend his final years in the home he had built. Mark was a good man, too good, really, for the woman sitting at the head of the table, draped in silk and certainty. Lydia tapped her spoon against her champagne flute. Ding, ding, ding. The sound echoed through the tension-choked room. She smiled, and that smile made my stomach twist. It was smooth, practiced. A morning show host greeting an audience, but we weren't an audience. We were her props. "Attention, everyone," she began, and the room fell silent. Her eyes slid dismissively over Mark and me, and then, like a spotlight, landed on Vanessa, Mark's younger sister. Vanessa, 30, scrolling through Instagram beneath the table, didn't even notice at first. Lydia's gaze sharpened. "Vanessa, darling, put the phone away. This concerns you." Vanessa flipped her hair, glancing up just enough to mumble, "What is it?" "Mom, I have plans in an hour," Lydia beamed, her teeth catching the light. "Cancel them, as you know, with Dad's health declining." She gestured vaguely to the end of the table where Robert sat in his wheelchair. Soup untouched, trembling slightly, but lucid. "I've decided to finalize the will early to avoid confusion later. I am leaving both the Victorian estate and the lake house to Vanessa." Silence. A vacuum that sucked the air from the room. Mark's fork clattered against the china. "What?" he said, his voice cracking like a brittle twig. "It makes the most sense." Lydia continued over him, as if he hadn't spoken. "Vanessa is the heart of this family. She has spirit. Verve, she represents the image I want for our legacy." Mark leaned forward, voice trembling. "Mom, we've lived here 6 years. We pay taxes, we fix the roof, we care for Grandpa." She waved her hand as if dismissing invisible dust. "And we appreciate that, truly. But you two functional worker bees, Vanessa needs security and style. You can always rent nearby. You'll land on your feet." I looked at Vanessa. She was grinning, predatory and oblivious. rearranging the mental furniture of the room while ignoring both Mark and our grandfather. My chest tightened. The betrayal wasn't just money or property, it was the erasure of years of sweat and devotion. I asked, calm but sharp, "Does Grandpa have a say in this?" Lydia laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Oh, Martha, Dad signed power of attorney over to me years ago. He trusts my judgment implicitly. Don't you? Daddy?" She didn't wait for Robert to answer, instead raising her glass to Vanessa, crowning her in absentia. Mark's face drained of color, his usual composure stripped away, leaving a hollow shell of despair. I squeezed his hand under the table, trying to ground us both. It wasn't just the house or money, it was the confirmation that, to Lydia, we were invisible, replaceable. But then I noticed Robert. His fork paused midair, eyes narrowing at his daughter with a clarity that sent shivers down my spine. He was observing, quiet, but fully present. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that someone else here could see through Lydia's performance. The dinner, meticulously prepared and arranged, the polished silverware, the fine china, the candles casting soft glows across the table, felt suddenly like a stage for a play that none of us had agreed to perform. The room was a battlefield disguised as elegance, and we were the unknowing soldiers caught in the crossfire of Lydia's self-styled theatrics. The migraine pulsed with every second, a reminder that my body was screaming what my mind already knew. This was a turning point. Every polite sip of water, every fake smile at Vanessa's obliviousness, every suppressed groan at Lydia's preening, it all built an invisible tension, thick enough to touch. Vanessa, meanwhile, barely looked up from her phone again. She seemed to float above the chaos, a golden child shielded by her mother's machinations. Every flick of her hair, every smirk, every half-hearted glance at Mark and me added insult to injury. She was unaware, or maybe she didn't care, that the house, the work, and the life Mark and I had poured into this place were being handed away like disposable paper. Lydia continued, her voice syrupy, punctuated by deliberate pauses that drew out the torment. "Vanessa embodies everything I wish to see in our legacy. She will carry the torch. You, Martha and Mark, have contributed, yes, but you lack the necessary flair for ownership." Mark's knuckles whitened as he gripped the table edge. His voice cracked. "Mom, we've done everything for this house, for Grandpa. You can't just..." "We're functional," Lydia interrupted smoothly, as if correcting a minor error in speech. "Vanessa's visionary, you two worker bees. And now, the decision is made." The room felt smaller, air heavier. I could barely breathe, my migraine screaming, but I forced myself to look at Robert. He hadn't moved yet, still spoon in hand, eyes cold and assessing. The way he stared at Lydia, not with anger but with that piercing clarity, made it obvious he saw everything. He wasn't fooled, not by the speeches, the smiles, the orchestrated performance. I tried to steady my voice, despite the rage boiling inside. "Lydia, this isn't just about ownership. It's about respect for the years Mark and I have invested. You're dismissing everything we've done." She barely glanced at me. "And we appreciate it. But let's be honest, you are practical. You maintain, you function. Vanessa, she brings life. She represents what I value." Mark sank lower in his chair, the color gone from his face. I felt my own blood pressure rise, the migraine now a sharp, insistent roar at the back of my skull. I clenched my fists under the table. Vanessa, still smirking, flipped her phone shut, as if to signal that she was ready to inherit a kingdom she hadn't worked for. It was surreal. The table, once a symbol of home, of family, now felt like a courtroom. Every glance, every movement, every carefully curated word from Lydia was a cross-examination of our loyalty, our effort, our very existence. Mark's jaw tightened. I could feel his despair radiating. We weren't just rejected, we were erased, relegated to spectators in our own life. Robert's fork finally settled onto his plate. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The betrayal wasn't hidden anymore. Lydia had shown her hand. And yet, Robert's eyes, those piercing blue eyes, fixed on Lydia with a calm intensity that was almost terrifying. It was as if he was weighing her every word, every movement, every intention. I realized then that the battle hadn't been lost. It hadn't even begun. Robert was awake. He was watching. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had a plan. The tension in the room was palpable. The Prussian crystal, the flickering candlelight, the meticulously arranged silverware, all the trappings of elegance only highlighted the raw, human betrayal playing out across the mahogany table. The migraine throbbed. But now it wasn't just pain. It was a drumbeat marking the gravity of the moment. Everything hinged on what would happen next. I leaned slightly toward Mark, whispering, just enough for him to hear. "See, Grandpa. He's not fooled. Not even a little." His eyes flickered toward Robert, and I saw a flicker of hope, a faint glimmer that maybe, despite Lydia's theatrics, we weren't entirely powerless. Lydia, oblivious to this silent exchange, continued her performance, her laugh, her gestures, her unwavering gaze toward Vanessa, every move designed to cement her control. But the presence of Robert at the table, calm, observant, and fully aware, cast a shadow over her victory. She thought she controlled the narrative. She didn't yet realize the player she underestimated. Mark's hands shook under the table, and I reached over, squeezing his fingers. The migraine still pulsed, but it faded slightly beneath the shock and the fear. Fear for our home, yes, but also a flicker of anticipation. This wasn't the end, not yet. The storm was coming, and we were right in the eye of it. The dinner ended with polite clinking of glasses, the sort of forced, superficial cheer that masked the turmoil underneath. Vanessa remained blissfully unaware, Lydia smug and triumphant, and Mark and I silently vowed we wouldn't be defeated so easily. Across the table, Robert ate his soup with deliberate calm, eyes never leaving Lydia. And for the first time that night, I realized something crucial: the game had changed. And the real player wasn't Lydia, it was him. The next morning, the house felt different, heavy with the aftermath of Lydia's declaration. The air was thick, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the next move. I was in the kitchen, making tea for Robert, following the morning routine we had perfected over years: breakfast, medication, newspaper headlines read aloud. It was quiet, a fragile calm, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Then the back door swung open, almost violently, and Vanessa breezed in, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, a tape measure clutched in one hand like a scepter. She didn't knock. Why would she? She owned this place now, at least according to Lydia's announcement. "Morning, Martha," she chirped, moving straight toward the windows, not even glancing at me. She yanked the drapes aside, inspected the sunlight slanting through the aging glass, and muttered, "God, these drapes are hideous. Are these original? They smell like old people." The words hung in the air, sharp and careless. I gripped the kettle so tightly my knuckles whitened. "Good morning, Vanessa. Robert's resting in the next room. Please keep your voice down." She laughed. A short, clipped sound. "Grandpa can sleep through a hurricane. Martha, you worry too much." She snapped her tape measure, letting it retract with a loud thwack that echoed through the kitchen. Then she turned to me, leaning against the counter, chewing an apple like she owned the place. "I'm thinking of blowing out this wall. Open concept, you know. Lydia said I could start renovations as soon as the papers are signed next month." I froze. "You're going to knock down a load-bearing wall in an 1800s Victorian..." My voice was tight. "Force neutral." She shrugged, sunglasses sliding down her nose. "I'll hire people for the details. Martha, you worry too much. That's why Mom says you're aging fast. You need to relax." My blood ran cold. She walked over, grabbed another apple, bit into it, and added casually, "By the way, Mom wants you to start packing up the carriage house. I promised my yoga instructor she could move in by August. It'll be a great income stream for me." I couldn't breathe for a second. August. That was less than 3 weeks away. "Vanessa, we have a lease." She cut me off, that cruel, empty smile on her face. "We didn't. Mom says since she's executive and holds POA, previous agreements are void during the transfer." It was like someone had shoved a knife into my chest and twisted. She didn't wait for a response, moving from room to room, tapping walls, humming to herself, completely oblivious to the chaos she was causing. I felt a surge of anger, almost uncontrollable, and I could see Mark peering over my shoulder from the living room, silent, pale, despair etched into every line of his face. He was frozen, broken in a way that made me ache. Vanessa's every action screamed Lydia's manipulation. The careless confidence, the entitlement, the sense that she could trample over our years of labor without consequence. It was all inherited from her mother's calculated cruelty. And the worst part, we were powerless to stop it, at least for now. The eviction threat hung over us, invisible but undeniable, each day ticking closer to the moment when Lydia's paper decree would try to erase us entirely. I followed her quietly, keeping an eye on her, hands trembling from rage and anxiety. Mark didn't speak. He couldn't. His despair filled the room, a heavy shadow I couldn't lift. No matter how hard I tried, we watched as she measured, inspected, and imagined the changes she would make. Her voice flippant, her presence aggressive, almost predatory. Every step was a reminder that Lydia had orchestrated this. Vanessa was the extension of her mother's will, a living testament to her manipulation. I finally caught my breath and said softly, almost to myself, "We can't let this happen. We just have to hold on a little longer." Mark nodded, silent, his eyes hollow, but there was a flicker, a small ember of hope that he didn't even realize was there yet. We had no idea that Robert was already several moves ahead, quietly orchestrating the counter-strike that would turn the tables. For now, though, all we could do was watch, helpless, as Vanessa claimed her territory, and the weight of what was coming pressed down on us. Her morning inspection ended with her lounging in the sunroom, twirling a glass of juice in her hand. as if she owned not just the walls, but the very air in the house. I clenched my fists, feeling the rage and fear churn into a knot of determination. The morning had begun with chaos, a preview of the storm Lydia and Vanessa had planned for us. And as I looked at Mark, despair etched across his face. I knew we had to stay strong, even if it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. This wasn't just a house, it was our life, our sweat, our love, and we weren't about to let it be stripped away without a fight. Later that morning, after Vanessa had invaded the estate with her tape measure and her careless authority, I found myself wandering the hallways, restless and jittery, the migraine still thudding behind my left eye. My thoughts were tangled with the events of dinner, the crushing betrayal, Lydia's smugness, Vanessa's obliviousness. I couldn't just sit there. Something told me to check on Robert, to see if there was any sign of clarity behind the frailty he displayed at the table. The library beckoned, dark and cluttered, filled with the rich scent of cedar and the faint lingering aroma of his long, unused pipe tobacco. It was a room Lydia avoided, as if its shadows held truths she dared not confront. I pushed the heavy oak door open, and there he was, sitting in his wheelchair at the desk, lamplight falling over his weathered face. His eyes, sharp and piercing, immediately found mine, and for a moment, I felt a jolt of disbelief. Gone was the frail, muddled man who had seemed almost absent at dinner. Instead, he exuded the sharp focus I remembered from decades past, the same intensity that had built his empire. His gaze met mine, unwavering, assessing, calculating. "You're lucid," I whispered, my voice shaky. "I'm old, Martha, not brain dead," he said, the rasp in his voice belying strength and intention. "But it serves me to let them think I am. People say the most interesting things when they think they're talking in front of a piece of furniture." My heart thumped wildly. "I thought you weren't aware of everything." Robert wheeled himself toward the wall of bookshelves, moving with deliberate care, fingers tracing spines like a conductor before an orchestra. "I've been watching quietly. Lydia thinks she controls the narrative. She doesn't. She forgets one crucial thing. I hold the real pen, the one that writes the fate of these estates." Curiosity mixed with a rising pulse of hope. "The pen? What do you mean?" He gestured to a particular shelf and pressed a worn, leather-bound book against the wall. There was a faint click, and the shelf shifted, revealing a hidden safe embedded in the wall. My breath caught. The safe was modest in size, but the weight of its contents was immeasurable. Robert reached in, extracting a thick folder and a set of heavy iron keys. "This," he said, handing them to me, "is the original deed to this house and the lake cottage, along with correspondence from my attorney, Henderson." I took the folder, my hands trembling, flipping through yellowed pages and pristine documents. The realization struck me like lightning. The entire estate, seemingly dangling at Lydia's whims, was actually secure, hidden in plain sight. The legal power to protect it rested with us. I felt a mixture of disbelief and awe. You planned this all along." Robert's piercing blue eyes studied me. "Lydia has power of attorney over my finances, yes, but she cannot touch these properties. They are in a trust, the deeds are protected. I can transfer them while I live, without her consent. I will not let this house, our legacy, fall into her hands." The gravity of his foresight sank in. hours ago. I'd felt powerless, crushed beneath the weight of betrayal. Now, standing in this dim, fragrant library, the hopelessness shifted to a focused, cautious hope. But the family Mark, I stammered. Shouldn't he? He shook his head gently. Mark is loyal, soft-hearted. He cannot resist guilt, not when Lydia wields it like a weapon. I cannot give him the deed directly. It would be coerced, undermined. You, Martha, are different. You have a backbone, and you respect this house. I'm transferring the deed to you. You will hold the shield, the house, the lake cottage they are yours to protect until the time is right. Mark will benefit too, but the responsibility must be yours. I gasped, the weight of what he was entrusting to me both terrifying and empowering. Me, but Lydia Vanessa, how? He placed a firm, cold hand over mine. I've anticipated everything. You will protect this home, and when the time is right, the truth will emerge. Ownership is not just a document, it is responsibility, courage, and vigilance. You can do this, Martha. I trust you to shield what we have built. My despair from the night before, the crushing sense of helplessness began to transform. I could almost feel the tide turning. All the anxiety, the frustration, the rage, they were now tools, sharpened by strategy, ready to be wielded at the precise moment. Hope was not naive or fragile. It was deliberate, backed by Robert's meticulous planning. He leaned back, eyes glinting with the wisdom of decades. Everything you've done here, the restoration, the care, the work has prepared you for this. You know the house intimately, its walls, its beams, its heart. You respect it. That is why you are the one I trust to wield this authority. I looked down at the folder, the deeds, the correspondence with Henderson, and felt an unfamiliar rush of adrenaline. The estate, once a looming threat of loss, was now a fortress. The documents, once pieces of paper, were the keys to justice, to preservation, to exposing Lydia's manipulation. Her arrogance had blinded her, and now her carefully constructed power would be undone by patience, planning, and precision. Robert continued, voice low but firm, a whisper laced with strategy. Henderson will come now, not tomorrow. The originals will be filed, recorded digitally. Lydia won't know. By the time she awakens, the deed is secure. Her assumption that she controls the narrative will be her undoing. I could feel the full weight of the responsibility. It was thrilling and terrifying. This wasn't just about legal documents. It was about setting the stage for exposure, ensuring that every manipulation, every lie, every abuse of power Lydia had attempted would meet an immovable obstacle. I felt the despair that had gripped me at dinner begin to dissipate, replaced by clarity, purpose, and resolve. You understand what this means, Martha? Robert asked, voice softening with gravity. This is about more than ownership. It's about protecting a legacy, a home, the life we've built. Your role is to shield, to manage, to stand firm. When the time comes, you will act with authority, and the truth will unfold naturally. I nodded, a sense of clarity settling in. Every frantic thought, every pang of fear from last night, every moment of hopelessness had led to this revelation. We were not powerless. We were the custodians of truth and history, equipped to confront Lydia's theatrics with strategy and law. Hope was no longer fragile. It was calculated, precise, and unstoppable. Robert's eyes softened slightly. a glimmer of pride behind the intensity. "Now go. Martha, let Henderson in. The trap is set. The timing is perfect. Hold the shield. Speak only when necessary. And remember, ownership is a document. But control requires vigilance and courage. The storm is coming, but it will break exactly where it should." I exhaled, steadying myself, clutching the folder to my chest. Shock and disbelief mingled with adrenaline and resolve. For the first time since Lydia's dinner announcement, I felt empowered, a sense of agency that had seemed impossible hours before. We were no longer on the defensive. We were prepared. The house, the lake cottage, our labor, and our love for this place, all of it was protected. And when the time came, Lydia would face the consequences of her arrogance, exposed in full view. Hope had returned, fortified by strategy and justice, and I was ready to wield it. The days leading up to the official deed transfer were some of the tensest I've ever experienced. Every morning felt like stepping onto a battlefield, except the weapons were patience, observation, and careful timing rather than anything overtly violent. Robert, despite his age, was the general, orchestrating moves with a precision that made the house feel alive with quiet strategy. Each hallway, each room, each shadowed corner seemed like a chessboard, and we were moving pieces, anticipating every possible counter from Lydia and her daughter. Vanessa, our first step was ensuring Henderson was available and ready. Robert's attorney wasn't just any lawyer, he was meticulous, a man whose reputation in legal circles was bordering on legendary. The kind of man who could make impossible situations unassailable. We coordinated with him in secret, arranging times and locations so Lydia would have no chance to intercept or even suspect our maneuver. Calls were discreet, schedules carefully staggered, and any unnecessary presence in the house was minimized. The estate was normally a bustling place, but in those days it became an arena of quiet preparation, a house on edge. Lydia's behavior only amplified the tension. She was pacing, shuffling through papers, issuing impossible directives to staff and family alike, all while maintaining the mask of control. But we could see the cracks. She was frantic under her polished exterior, glancing toward rooms she assumed empty, moving like a predator searching for prey. Every morning, I watched from a distance, trying not to be seen as I traced her steps, noting patterns and tendencies. It felt almost surreal, a woman who had built her power on appearance and perception, now acting out of desperation, unaware that the true control rested just out of her reach. Mark, meanwhile, had withdrawn into a quiet, grim focus. He worked with his hands, organizing, repairing, checking systems. But every now and then, his gaze would drift toward Vanessa, who was still measuring walls, inspecting light fixtures, and imagining renovations. His despair was palpable, and it weighed on me like a physical force. He couldn't see what Robert and I had discovered, what we had set into motion, and it was agonizing to watch him live in that helplessness. I would reach for him sometimes, squeezing his hand, reminding him that we weren't entirely powerless, though the words barely seemed enough. Robert's instructions were precise. Every action we took had to reinforce his plan without alerting Lydia. For example, when I was tasked with routine care and meals, I was vigilant about where I went, what I spoke about, and which rooms I entered. Every movement was calculated to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. that Lydia's grip was as firm as she believed. Meanwhile, the real control, the deeds, the transfer, the preparation for Henderson's arrival was entirely out of her sight. We staged the house carefully, too. It was a delicate balance, letting Lydia feel she was in command without giving her any real opportunity to act. Rooms were cleaned, arrangements subtly adjusted, staff coordinated discreetly. Every interaction with Vanessa had to be controlled. Her exuberance and ignorance made her unpredictable, and any slip could compromise Robert's plan. We learned to anticipate her impulses, nudging her attention subtly, steering her away from areas of interest, keeping her busy with superficial inspections and irrelevant details. Even the smallest tasks took on enormous significance. Carrying a document from one room to another wasn't just mundane. It was part of a choreography to keep Lydia off balance and unaware of Henderson's impending arrival. Every knock on a door, every sip of tea, every question asked of a staff member had to be intentional, purposeful. The estate, with its long corridors, hidden stairways, and shadowed corners, became both a fortress and a stage for our calculated performance. The suspense was constant. Every creak of floorboards, every slammed door, every hurried step from Lydia or Vanessa sent spikes of adrenaline through me. We had to anticipate every possible interference, every attempt to delay, intercept, or manipulate. Even a casual glance from Lydia could be a probe, testing the boundaries of control. Mark and I learned to act almost instinctively, responding without overreacting, keeping the tension high but contained, maintaining the necessary balance between action and deception. We also had to manage the timeline. The transfer had to be precise, coordinated with Henderson, and executed when Lydia was isolated and unsuspecting. Robert had specified the exact moment the documents to be filed, the digital records established, all without tipping her off. This required hours of preparation, ensuring Henderson could arrive undetected, that the staff knew exactly what to expect, and that the house itself was staged in a way that looked normal but actually concealed the strategic maneuvers we were executing. Timing was everything. One misstep could ruin days of planning and give Lydia the opportunity to regain control. Monitoring Lydia became an art. We learned her routines, predicted her movements, and interpreted her behaviors like signals in a code. A sudden pause in the hallway, a glance toward the library, a muttered complaint, all were pieces of intelligence. I would report subtle observations to Robert, who adjusted the plan accordingly. Each day, the chessboard shifted slightly, pieces moving with deliberate precision, opponents unaware of the forces operating just beyond their perception. The psychological aspect was equally important. Lydia needed to feel omnipotent, to believe she still controlled the estate, while we quietly stripped away the means of her power. Every interaction was calculated to reinforce her illusion. We allowed her small victories in the superficial sense. Vanessa could measure walls, shift furniture, and talk as if she were the mistress of the manor. But the real authority, the deeds, the legal leverage, remained out of reach. The tension built, thick and suffocating, because Lydia's every confident step was a ticking time bomb, and we had the fuse in our hands. Mark and I found ourselves in a state of constant alertness. Sleep was shallow, thoughts spinning with contingencies. I would wake before dawn, reviewing every detail, anticipating potential interference, while Mark focused on structural work, keeping busy to manage his anxiety. Our coordination with Robert was telepathic at times. Each small gesture or whispered instruction reinforcing the strategy. The house, once a place of labor and care, became a nerve center of surveillance, preparation, and precise execution. We rehearsed the public confrontation in our minds repeatedly. Every possible question, every bluff, every attempt Lydia could make to manipulate the notary or the guests had been anticipated. I learned to anticipate her bluffs and counter them without revealing our hand. Every morning and evening was a rehearsal, fine-tuning our responses and ensuring that the transfer, when executed, would be flawless, undeniable, and unassailable. Through all of this, the suspense never let up. Walking through the corridors, passing rooms where Vanessa flitted about, hearing Lydia pacing above, the tension was like a taut wire stretched across the house. Every sound could signal a change, every shadow could hide a threat, and yet, through the exhaustion and adrenaline, there was a growing sense of confidence, a certainty that we were poised for the moment that would finally reveal the truth. Robert's plan was meticulous, and the more we followed it, the more the inevitability of Lydia's eventual exposure crystallized. By the time the day before the transfer arrived, every detail was accounted for. The house had become a fortress of subtle movements and careful orchestration, each of us acting as pawns and queens, knights and rooks, in a game that was invisible to the unsuspecting Lydia. Henderson's arrival, the timing, the staging, the surveillance, it all came together in a tense, high-stakes chess game that had been months in the making. And in that moment, the quiet undercurrent of fear and suspense transformed into a sharp, focused anticipation, a sense that at any moment, the long-awaited checkmate would arrive, and the game would finally end in our favor. Friday arrived with a suffocating humidity that made the air feel heavy, like a wet wool blanket pressing down on the estate. The day was perfectly suited for the showdown that Lydia had meticulously staged, a ceremonial coronation disguised as a family gathering. By noon, the garden was transformed into a scene of curated elegance. White linen tablecloths fluttered in the breeze, crystal glassware sparkled under the unforgiving sun, and a string quartet played Vivaldi in the gazebo, their bows moving in perfect synchronization, adding an almost surreal soundtrack to the tension. Guests filled the lawn, the county's elite in attendance, local politicians, members of the historical society, bridge club rivals, all witnesses to what Lydia had planned as a display of her power and benevolence. The meticulously arranged chairs, the trimmed hedges, the sparkling crystal, all of it screamed control, opulence, and carefully managed appearances. To the casual eye, it was a garden party. To those of us standing on the periphery, it was the stage for the reckoning that Lydia thought she had engineered. I stood near the catering tent, wearing a simple navy dress, the sun beating down on my shoulders, my heart hammering against my ribs. Beside me, Mark tugged at his collar, his face pale and taut with anxiety. "I can't watch this," he muttered, eyes fixed on Vanessa, twirling in the center of the lawn in a dress far too expensive for her youth or experience. She spun with careless confidence, oblivious to the precarious balance of power on which she had been placed. "I can't watch them steal Grandpa's home." "Stay," I said, gripping his arm. "Just wait. You need to see this." Vanessa didn't know it, but every confident movement she made, every air kiss she returned to the onlookers, every flick of her hair was part of Lydia's carefully crafted illusion. Lydia had orchestrated this entire scene to display control, authority, and generosity, all while disregarding the years Mark and I had poured into maintaining the estate. And yet, despite her grand stage, I can feel the undercurrent of panic she tried to mask. This was her performance, but it was about to unravel. Lydia emerged from the house like a queen presiding over her domain, dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit and a wide-brimmed hat, channeling every cinematic matriarch stereotype she could muster. She accepted air kisses and compliments with deliberate grace, every gesture calculated, and she walked as though the entire crowd belonged to her, ignoring Mark and me completely, as if we were already ghosts. I could see the satisfaction in her eyes, the smugness in her posture, confident that the deed to the estates would soon be formally transferred to Vanessa. At precisely 1 o'clock, the music stopped. The string quartet lowered their bows, the sun glinting off polished instruments, and Lydia tapped a silver spoon against a microphone stand, a ritualistic flourish that signaled to the crowd that something momentous was about to occur. "Thank you all for coming," she announced, voice projected across the lawn, firm and practiced. "Today is a momentous day. As many of you know, my father, Robert, has been declining." She gestured toward him, slumped in his wheelchair, blanket draped over his lap, appearing frail and almost unaware of his surroundings. The tableau was perfect. She had staged it meticulously. "Because of his condition," Lydia continued, adopting a somber, pious tone, "the burden of managing this historic estate has fallen to me. It is a heavy burden, but one I must now pass on to the next generation, to the person who embodies the spirit, the youth, and the vibrancy of this family." She swept her arm toward Vanessa, who stepped forward, feigning humility, smiling with the practiced grace of someone who had been rehearsing for this moment her entire life. Lydia's eyes flicked to Mark and me, the faintest hint of disdain crossing her carefully curated expression, as if to remind us we were merely spectators. "I am thrilled to announce that today I am formally transferring the deeds of the main estate and the lake cottage to my daughter Vanessa. She is the heart of this family." Polite applause rippled through the crowd, a mixture of social duty and curiosity, everyone playing their part in the drama that Lydia had constructed, and then she motioned toward a nervous-looking notary. Mr. Potts, seated at a small table with a stack of documents. "Mr. Potts, if you would please prepare the transfer for signature," Lydia commanded, her smile wide, confidence radiating in waves. "I, as power of attorney, will sign on Robert's behalf." I could feel Mark stiffen beside me, his hand gripping mine. I barely had time to brace him when a deep voice cut through the ceremony. "Actually, Mrs. Lydia." The voice carried over the hushed murmurs of the guests. It wasn't Mr. Potts. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out from the shadows of the porch, leather briefcase in hand, walking up the steps as if he belonged there. Every eye in the crowd turned, a collective intake of breath breaking the tension. "I am Mr. Henderson, Robert's longtime attorney. I represent him directly, and there seems to be a misunderstanding regarding the assets you are attempting to transfer." Lydia froze, her practiced composure faltering for the first time. "Don't be silly," she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "I have power of attorney. I can transfer whatever I like." Henderson opened his briefcase with deliberate calm, pulling out a document stamped with the official county seal. "You have power of attorney for management. Yes, but you do not have the authority to transfer assets no longer in your father's name." A silence fell over the crowd, so thick it was almost tangible. The string quartet's bows lowered in unison, as if sensing the shift in the air. Guests leaned forward, murmuring, the tension palpable, eyes darting between Lydia, Henderson, and Robert. Lydia's face paled, and she stepped closer, voice tight and sharp. "Get out of here." Henderson held the stamped documents aloft, calm and immovable. As of Wednesday afternoon, the title to this estate and the lake cottage was transferred inter vivos, a gift between living persons. The deed has been recorded, the electronic filing complete. Lydia's face turned gray, her carefully rehearsed confidence crumbling. Transferred to whom I didn't authorize that." Henderson's tone remained measured. "The owner authorized it, Robert himself. The documents reflect his intent and capacity." Every word landed like a hammer strike. The realization spread through the crowd. Lydia had been deceived, outmaneuvered, and exposed in front of witnesses. Robert straightened in his wheelchair, removing the blanket from his lap. The man slumped, and quiet at dinner was gone, replaced by the clarity and authority of a lifetime of experience. "It's Friday, Lydia," he said, voice strong and commanding, carrying across the garden. "And you're fired." His eyes, once calm and observing, now burned with an intensity that silenced every whisper. The crowd gasped, glasses were dropped, murmurs rose and fell in waves. Lydia's mouth opened, but no words came. She stammered. You can talk. I've always been able to talk," Robert said, voice cutting through the heat and tension. "I stopped because I didn't like what I was hearing. I heard you planning to sell the lake house to pay your debts. I heard you tell Vanessa she could bulldoze the library. I heard you call Mark a loser because he works with his hands." Vanessa's face fell, disbelief spreading across her features. She had believed in the certainty of her inheritance, the unassailable power of her mother's authority. Now she looked like a child realizing the magician's trick had been exposed. Her twirling stopped, the tape measure dangling uselessly in her hand. She glanced at her mother, confusion and panic dawning. Robert's gaze swept over Mark and me, and I saw relief and pride mirrored in his eyes. "I transferred the house to the only person in this family who knows the value of a foundation. The house belongs to Martha." His words landed with a finality that echoed across the lawn. Lydia whipped her head toward me, her eyes bulging with fury. "Martha, you gave my house to the help." "She isn't the help," Mark said, stepping forward, voice steady but filled with disbelief and anger. "She's my wife, and apparently your landlord now." The facade shattered completely. Lydia lunged for the papers in Henderson's hand. "This is fraud. She manipulated him. I'll sue." Her voice cracked with desperation, her aristocratic composure evaporating under the weight of exposure. Henderson closed the file with deliberate precision. "You can try, but we have video testimony of Robert signing these documents, clearly stating his intent and his capacity. Also, The foreclosure notices for your personal condo will be considered. If I were you, I'd be more concerned about where you'll sleep tonight than your lawsuits. Vanessa, stunned and humiliated, shrieked at her mother. You said you had the money you promised. But the anger and confusion had no audience. Lydia, exposed and powerless, could only glare, trembling. Her voice reduced to desperate hisses. She had been revealed not just as incompetent, but as reckless, manipulative, and financially irresponsible. Her empire of appearances crumbled in a moment, leaving her small, ordinary, and utterly defeated. The crowd began to scatter, whispering, murmuring, eager to escape the implosion of Lydia's authority. Vanessa grabbed a bottle of wine and a sports car, leaving behind the spectacle she had believed would secure her fortune. Mark and I remained with Robert, standing amid the quiet aftermath, the sun casting long shadows across the meticulously restored lawn. And the estate was ours, secured not just by law, but by patience, foresight, and a well-executed plan. The cinematic tension of the day, the carefully staged battle, had reached its climax, and justice, finally, was unmistakably served. After the chaos of the public showdown, the estate finally began to settle into a new reality, one that felt simultaneously surreal and incredibly freeing. Lydia refused to leave at first, locking herself in the master suite, hissing threats through the door and claiming squatters' rights as if some law could protect her from the consequences of her own deceit. But Henderson had already anticipated this. The sheriff's deputies were stationed discreetly at the end of the driveway, waiting for the inevitable. Watching Lydia being escorted out of the home she had tried to dominate for decades was a surreal mix of relief and quiet triumph. She wasn't screaming and kicking like one might expect. She was cold, venomous, and resigned all at once. Each step she took toward the squad car felt like a release of the tension that had gripped the house for so long. Vanessa didn't stick around for the eviction, disappearing in her sports car with the uneaten wine and her delusions of grandeur, likely realizing too late that her mother's promises were empty. It was astonishing to see how quickly the illusion of wealth and power evaporated when faced with truth. For Mark and me, the immediate aftermath was less about spectacle and more about repair, restoration, and reclamation. The estate, while secure legally, needed us in a more intimate, personal way. The first task was to restore not only the house itself, but also the rhythms of daily life that Lydia and Vanessa's presence had disrupted. We began with the furniture Vanessa had acquired on credit, pieces that were gaudy, out of place, and unnecessary. Selling them wasn't just about clearing space, it was about reclaiming the aesthetic and integrity of the home. Every item we removed felt like a small victory, a tangible undoing of the chaos that had been inflicted upon us. We moved back into the main wing of the house, leaving behind the converted carriage house that had been our temporary home. For the first time in years, the main estate felt like ours again, not just legally, but emotionally. There was a quiet satisfaction in the simple acts of opening the front door without hesitation, walking through the rooms without anxiety, knowing that our labor, love, and loyalty had been recognized and protected. The restored air of the house reflected the restoration of our lives, a chance to build something real, lasting, and undisturbed by manipulation or entitlement. Robert, now freed from the pressures of Lydia's control, settled into a routine that was calm, structured, and respectful of his independence. We hired a nurse to assist with his daily care, not because we couldn't provide it ourselves, but because it allowed us to offer him the best possible support without the constant shadow of obligation. Mark and I could finally spend time with him in meaningful ways, reading, walking the gardens, discussing the history and architecture of the estate, and simply enjoying the quiet companionship that had been rare during the months of tension. The warmth of those moments, the normalcy, was a balm for all the stress and fear that had preceded them. Restoring the house itself became both a practical and symbolic act. Mark undertook renovations he had dreamed of for years, carefully preserving the original molding in the dining room and repairing structural issues that had been neglected for decades. I focused on spaces that reflected our care and attention, transforming the sunroom into a proper reading room for Robert, a place filled with light, comfort, and books that had meaning. Each restoration, each repaired surface, each cleaned and polished room felt like reclaiming not just property, but dignity, a quiet affirmation of the life and love invested in this home. The legal closure brought a strange but wonderful sense of safety. We were finally in control, and that control was exercised with responsibility, integrity, and vision rather than entitlement. Lydia's failed lawsuits were quickly dismissed, her attempts to claim undue influence falling flat in the face of Henderson's thorough documentation, including video testimony of Robert's clear intent. The threat she had represented, so monumental in our minds for months, was reduced to a distant, hollow echo. She was living in a small apartment on the other side of town, working at a department store perfume counter, a humbling end for someone who had once orchestrated her every move for the sake of appearances. Observing her from a distance, I felt no glee, just the quiet satisfaction of justice served and the closure that allowed us to breathe freely again. The months that followed were a blur of constructive activity, a far cry from the tension-filled days we had endured. The estate was secure, the renovations continued with purpose, and the emotional weight of past manipulation gradually lifted. We could finally give Robert the life and comfort he deserved. Leveraging the estate responsibly to address issues that truly mattered, from structural repairs to the aesthetics that reflected the home's history and integrity. We weren't just preserving the property, we were restoring the spirit of the place, and with it, our own peace. Reflecting on the experience, it became clear that boundaries and loyalty had been central to our success. Mark's dedication to the estate, my knowledge and care for its preservation, and Robert's strategic foresight all converged to protect not just property, but values, the principles that had been threatened by Lydia's manipulations. I realized that sometimes love and loyalty require the courage to set limits, to say no, and to act decisively to protect what matters. It wasn't a lesson in punishment or retribution. It was about ensuring that integrity and respect for effort were honored. Mark and I also discovered a renewed sense of partnership, both in our marriage and in the stewardship of the estate. Working together, navigating the legal, emotional, and practical challenges, strengthened our bond and clarified our priorities. We could invest in the home without fear, care for Robert without resentment, and rebuild our lives in a space where our labor and dedication were finally recognized. The house, once a symbol of tension and anxiety, had become a haven, a canvas upon which we could imprint both our love and our vision for the future. The sun setting over the lake, golden light spilling across the restored floorboards and polished surfaces, became a daily reminder of the resilience and patience that had carried us through the ordeal. Robert would sit in his favorite chair, watching the light shift and the gardens sway, content in ways that had been impossible when Lydia and Vanessa's chaos loomed over us. We would join him, coffee in hand, sharing quiet conversation or comfortable silence, appreciating the depth of history, life, and family that the estate embodied. The sense of justice and satisfaction wasn't loud or performative. It was in the small victories: a repaired wall, a polished banister, a clear legal title, a shared smile with Mark, Robert's quiet nod of approval. It was in the recognition that effort, loyalty, and careful planning could withstand even the most manipulative forces. The house, finally ours in every meaningful sense, became a testament to patience, courage, and strategic thinking. As the months passed, life regained a rhythm that felt authentic, secure, and deeply rewarding. We hosted family and friends, not for appearances or social theater, but to celebrate the home itself, its history, and the life we had fought to preserve. Renovations continued in earnest, always respectful of the estate's legacy, blending care, craftsmanship, and purpose. Every nail hammered, every beam restored, every room arranged reflected both our labor and our love. The experience had taught us profound lessons about trust, resilience, and the necessity of boundaries. Lydia's machinations, while destructive and painful, underscored the importance of vigilance, preparation, and decisive action. And in the quiet aftermath, we could see clearly that love and loyalty, while powerful, must be paired with strength, foresight, and courage to truly protect what matters. We had preserved the estate, yes, but we had also reclaimed our lives, our dignity, and the quiet satisfaction of justice well served. One crisp autumn evening, Mark, Robert, and I sat together on the back porch, the air smelling of fallen leaves in the woods beyond. The lake glimmered in the fading light, reflecting the house and the gardens we'd restored. Robert, patting the arm of his chair, smiled at us, his blue eyes calm and content. "This house has stood for 100 years, he said softly, through births, deaths, wars, and parties. But I think it's finally happy." I laughed, leaning my head on Mark's shoulder, feeling the tension of the past months dissolve into the crisp evening air. We had ownership of the house, yes, but more importantly, we had reclaimed our lives, our partnership, and our sense of security. The image Lydia had tried so desperately to curate was shattered, replaced by something far more enduring: a life built on integrity, patience, and love. A legacy we could honor in every careful, deliberate action. The estate had survived. We had survived. And in that survival, we found a profound satisfaction and peace that no manipulation or deceit could ever take from us. With the estate finally secure and Lydia's schemes revealed, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Mark, Robert, and I not only restored the house, but also reclaimed our sense of control, learning the power of patience, courage, and clear boundaries. The home became a place of care, history, and renewed purpose, reflecting the resilience we discovered in ourselves. If you enjoyed seeing justice served and perseverance rewarded, stick around for more stories like this. They're the ones that keep you hooked from start to finish.